Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Aaron. The acting head of the Transportation Security Administration has been pulled from his job after revelations of security failures at dozens of the nation's busiest airports. Undercover agents were able to smuggle weapons, fake explosives, and other contraband through numerous checkpoints. Procedures at airports are now being revised and officers are being retrained. Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson reassigned the leader of the TSA and directed the agency to revise airport security procedures, retrain officers, and retest screening equipment in airports across the country. The changes come after an internal report found shocking failures in airport security, specifically the ability to take banned items right through TSA checkpoints. The series of tests were conducted by undercover Homeland Security agents posing as passengers. According to ABC News, the agents were able to smuggle items such as mock explosives and weapons through TSA checkpoints in 67 out of 70 attempts.
Anytime there's a high rate of misses, that causes concern.
This is not the first time the TSA has had trouble with security breaches. In 2013, an undercover investigator with a fake bomb hidden on his body passed through a metal detector, went through a pat-down at New Jersey's Newark Liberty Airport, and was never caught.
The terrorists do watch this thing. They do watch and they go to school on how they can learn from possible vulnerabilities.
Johnson is demanding the agency immediately revise standard operating procedures for screenings, provide intensive training for supervisors, retest and reevaluate screening equipment, and TSA screeners can expect even more random covert testing. Meanwhile, the administration still touts its dedication to safety and security. And in 2014, the TSA confiscated more than 2,000 firearms at 224 airports after screening 653 million passengers.
President Obama told an Israeli news outlet a military strike would not fix Iran's nuclear program. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, Israeli officials still want all options on the table.
Obama said a negotiated settlement is the best solution to Iran's nuclear program.
I think, demonstrate, not based on any hope, but on facts and evidence and analysis, that the best way to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon is a verifiable, tough agreement.
He added a military solution wouldn't work.
A military solution will not fix it, even if the United States participates. It would temporarily slow down an Iranian nuclear program, but it will not eliminate it.
Obama tried to calm a skeptical Israeli public when he said he understood their fears and concerns. The interview also seemed designed to oppose the stance of the Netanyahu government. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly stated the current deal being negotiated by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry would not stop, but actually pave the way for Iran to develop a nuclear bomb. The proposed deal would freeze Iran's nuclear program for a decade in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. Obama's remarks come with the deadline for an Iranian deal less than 30 days away. Negotiations are scheduled to wrap up on June 30th. In the meantime, a siren sounded Tuesday throughout most of Israel as part of a 5-day nationwide drill. It's the 8th annual drill to prepare for the possibility of a multi-front war. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The U.S.-led coalition fighting against ISIS is re-examining its strategy after the terrorist group's recent gains in Syria and Iraq. The coalition is meeting in Paris after ISIS conquered both the Iraqi city of Ramadi and the historic Syrian city of Palmyra. More than 4,000 airstrikes by the coalition have failed to stop gains by ISIS. But the top U.S. envoy for the coalition is defending its strategy.
I would contend that saying that it's not going well for the coalition just isn't correct. We do have setbacks, and Ramadi is definitely a setback. There are elements of Iraqi security forces that are approaching Ramadi now. So it's not like Mosul, where it collapsed and it has remained in Daesh's hands now for well over a year. The Iraqis are going to take Ramadi back.
No sharp change in strategy is expected to be announced at today's meeting.
Nearly 100 public schools have closed in Kenya as teachers refuse to work out of fear of terrorist attacks. More than 2,000 Christian teachers in northern Kenya have stopped showing up to work because they fear for their lives. This comes after Somali terrorists from al-Shabaab killed 148 Christian students at Garissa University College in northern Kenya back in April. Although that region of Kenya is predominantly Muslim, schools rely heavily on Christian teachers. Kenyan authorities say nearly 500 other schools are facing the possibility of shutting down.
The price of the Affordable Care Act could go up for millions of Americans next year. That's what experts tell Politico.com. Prices have already gone up in the first 2 years with the health care plan, and they could rise even more significantly next year. Plans in some states could go up 25 to 30%, while others would increase, but not as much. The increases come as Republicans are looking at alternatives to Obamacare, as it faces a major challenge at the Supreme Court, with a ruling likely to come down in the next several weeks.
Republicans are calling it another Obama power grab. The Environmental Protection Agency is cracking down on pollution by broadening restrictions previously put in place by the Clean Water Act. The EPA says it is a necessary step to promote clean drinking water. Critics say it's just another example of government overreach. Paul Strand brings us this story now from Washington.
The new Environmental Protection Agency regulations deal with streams and wetlands. The administration says the rules will protect the drinking water of 117 million Americans. With these new rules, the EPA says it hopes to clear up any misunderstandings left behind by what the Supreme Court's ruled on the Clean Water Act. But the new regulations have met with quite a bit of pushback from Republicans. Nick Loris, who specializes in energy and the environment at the Heritage Foundation, says the move is more about attacking private property rights.
You could see farmers, you could see home builders, you could see private property owners, all effectively paying, tens of thousands of dollars in permit requirements, in having their land taken from them by the Environmental Protection Agencies.
House Speaker John Boehner took a similar position, saying the administration's decree to unilaterally expand federal authority is a raw and tyrannical power grab that will crush jobs. These leaders know firsthand that the rule is being shoved down the throats of hardworking people with no input and places landowners, small businesses, farmers, and manufacturers on the road to a regulatory and economic hell. Some farmers say it will be bad for business, as critics warn the government will now have oversight of every puddle, stream, and lake on their land. CBN News reached out to the EPA for a statement on how the rules will affect farmers. They referred us to a past statement that says the agency's intent is to protect clean water without getting in the way of farming and ranching. Normal farming and ranching, including planting, harvesting, and moving livestock, have always been exempt from Clean Water Act regulation, and our proposal doesn't change that. Some environmentalists say the new guidelines will be the biggest victory for clean water in a decade. But some Republicans in Congress say they will fight tooth and nail to see the regulations overturned.
Congress is very focused on stopping the EPA's land grab. They've already introduced an amendment to an appropriations bill that the administration said they would veto.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Oklahoma Republican Senator James Inhofe, the chairman of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, says Obama and the EPA are, quote, aggressively pushing an extreme and costly regulatory agenda, and that will hurt the economy and the everyday lives of Americans. His committee will look at legislation to take aim at EPA regulations.
A Jewish group that offers therapy for people seeking freedom from same-sex attraction is fighting for their rights in court today. The name of the group is Jews Offering a New Alternative for Healing, or JONAH. They say this case is really about religious freedom. The New Jersey-based group was targeted by the liberal Southern Poverty Law Center. They accuse JONAH of fraud because they offer therapy to help people overcome homosexuality. The judge has already sided with the SPLC's request to bar JONAH's experts from testifying. The Freedom of Conscience Defense Fund is representing JONAH in this case.
This is not about some particular kind of therapy. Sometimes these are called reparative or conversion therapy. It's any kind of counseling help the Southern Poverty Law Center is now saying is fraudulent because nobody in the history of the human race has ever been helped. And that's just not true. There's at least a half a dozen clients who are going to testify with compelling stories of how much the counseling they received through organizations like JONAH helped them.
Gallagher says the Southern Poverty Law Center has already said they're planning to take aim at 70 other groups, including Christian counselors. She says they're using their massive $300 million war chest to try to bankrupt small groups that promote biblical values.
Rescue workers in China are searching for survivors after a cruise ship carrying 458 people capsized Tuesday. The ship went down in the Yangtze River. So far, only 12 people have been rescued, including the captain and chief engineer. Both are being held by police. At least 5 people are dead, and more than 400 others are still missing. Officials are still working to figure out what caused the ship to go down. Area media report many of the passengers were between 50 and 80 years old and on a group tour.
Have we really reached the final days of NSA phone record collecting? Still ahead, our terrorism analyst draws the line between protecting freedom and protecting society. The NSA has been forced to stop collecting Americans' phone records in bulk, at least for now. Congress missed the deadline to keep key parts of the U.S. Patriot Act from expiring. Right now, the Senate is said to have enough votes to pass the bill to extend the program. It would also reform NSA's once secret mass collection of Americans' phone records, but Kentucky Senator Rand Paul forced a delay on the vote. Intelligence officials warn any lapse in surveillance puts the nation at risk. The president and most Republicans also want a fix to restore the Patriot Act soon.
Joining us now for more is CBN Terrorism Analyst Eric Stakelbeck. Eric, some charge that ending data bulk collection puts society at risk, but others say it's never led to one arrest. What's your take?
You know, this is a very difficult issue, Ephraim. On one hand, absolutely. This program has been essential to infiltrating and breaking up Islamic terrorist networks here in the United States. Maybe it didn't break up a specific plot that we know about, but that's not really the point of this program. The main point is identifying patterns and networks and patterns of communication between Islamic radicals and any kind of radical in the country. So that's on one hand. And again, names and addresses of people are not compiled as part of this program. On the other hand, I do understand people's hesitancy. They feel it's giving the government a lot of power. I think the main issue here, Ephraim, is a lack of trust in the Obama administration. You've had the IRS scandals. You've had scandals with the Department of Justice going after journalists. You've had a number of scandals, Benghazi, where there was dishonesty from this administration. So I think at the end of the day, the pushback against this program is coming from people who just don't trust the Obama administration to have this kind of power.
Not having this program certainly creates a gap. Do you think that terrorists could be exploiting this gap in surveillance right now?
I do, Ephraim. Look, I think, number one, it's got to give them heart in term or encouragement, the terrorists. They see us having a squabble again over national security and how to fight this war against radical Islam. It's a war the Obama administration won't even acknowledge exists, so it's a semantic war. But now on the ground, they see Republicans divided as well. So I think that's encouraging to the bad guys. And yes, if you don't have this program in place, all of a sudden some of those communications, some of those conversations are unbeknownst to our intelligence community. We've had several plots. We've had 41 U.S. citizens, Ephraim, arrested since January 1st alone. That's what, 5-6 months already, not even 6 months. 41 American citizens arrested on Islamic terror charges, the overwhelming majority related to ISIS. We've had dozens and dozens of terrorist plots broken up here in the U.S. since 9/11, and a lot of the intelligence compiled by this program aids in identifying these networks.
We know that the House has produced the USA Freedom Act, and the Senate could vote on it relatively soon. What can you tell us about this bill?
Well, look, I think it's something that does need to be passed. It kind of echoes a lot of the things we're talking about, Ephraim, in terms of, monitoring potential Islamic terrorists. So I think it's kind of an extension of what we're talking about with the NSA program. And look, I'm a guy who is opposed to big government as anyone, who is very skeptical of big government. But again, I can't stress enough that people I speak to, who I respect, who really know the legal ins and outs of this as well. I'm not a lawyer, I'll be the first one to admit, but people who really get the legal ins and outs of this, Ephraim, are saying, look, We need it. People have their ear to the ground in the national security community, both on the right and on the other side of the aisle, are both saying we need this. And if we don't have it, especially in a climate, again, now, where ISIS is so determined to strike us on American soil, I fear we may be leaving ourselves open.
All right, this is one to continue to watch. CBN Terrorism Analyst Eric Stakelbeck, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ephraim.
Up next, right in America's breadbasket, 1 in 5 children often goes hungry. And with school out soon for summer, more kids will be feeling the pangs. Watch what's being done to fight childhood hunger after this. After a long, cold winter, summer is almost here, and most kids are happy about that because it brings vacation from school.
Indeed, but a surprising number of children don't have enough food, even in places you'd never expect. This week marks the kickoff of a campaign aimed at getting food to needy children across the U.S. David Brody brings us the story.
The carefree days of summer, a time for ice cream and dips in the pool. But for millions of American children, these days are far from carefree. When school lets out, hunger can become a reality.
For every 7 kids getting a free or reduced price lunch, only about 1 gets a meal during the summer. So that's a huge gap in terms of participation.
Parents must find creative ways to fill that gap.
When you think about a family's food budget, or family's budget in general, you have your rent or your mortgage, you have your utilities, your transportation costs. These are fixed costs, whereas a food budget is really one of the more flexible parts of the budget.
Leaving parents with a difficult question: pay bills or cut back on groceries? Many turn to the government, which provides a lot of food, but leaves some big gaps. According to Christine Melendez of Bread for the World, the U.S. fills about 19 of every 20 food bags going to needy families. While its summer meal programs reach a lot of city kids, it can leave children in rural areas behind. A recent White House report reveals 1.5 million rural children live in poverty. Case in point, Iowa, middle of the nation's breadbasket, where 1 in 5 children often go hungry. Iowa is usually known as the political capital of the world, but it could now be known, potentially, as the hunger-fighting capital of the world. Meet Susan Bunz and Christina Zink, 2 women from different organizations taking up the same fight, ending hunger in Iowa. Bunz enters the battle without government assistance through Meals from the Heartland. The nonprofit Christian organization packages meals for children all over the world. Last year, they provided more than 10 million.
So this is our packaging area. We can have 120 people in here at a time packaging meals. Usually what you'd have is 10 people at each ends of these table. They box at the end. We generally figure that a group of 10 can do 2,000 meals an hour.
Many of those meals are needed right here in Iowa, a fact that surprises outsiders.
There's these gaps and holes, just like any other place, where there's a need for food that isn't being met. Yeah. Why it happens or how you correct it, I'm not sure. Yeah. Our problem is they're kids and adults and elderly. And we leave out the elderly a lot that need meals.
Getting those meals into hungry bellies takes a team effort. First stop is a supply place like the Food Bank of Iowa. This is where Zink steps in.
Our clients are definitely working. 60% work full-time. And of that 60%, 19% work over 40 hours. But hunger really doesn't discriminate, and it takes just one incident to put you at risk. It could be a car repair, a medical emergency, the loss of a job. And it's really not just in the metro either. We have a large rural population that has a lack of resources that we're trying to reach out to.
Through a new initiative, the Food Bank focuses on getting food to some of those rural areas. Zink says partnering with Christian organizations and other agencies helps get food across the state.
It's definitely important for organizations like the Food Bank and our partner agencies and our program partners. We really couldn't do it without them. It really does take a community, and without some of the government support that's on the line right now, it'll take even more of that effort of individual and corporate support to help us feed people.
Effort that comes from groups like CBN's Operation Blessing. The Operation Blessing Hunger Strike Force has a fleet of trucks that distributes food and supplies to needy people. Last year, they delivered 64 million pounds of food and supplies to community-based partners. These partners then work with local food pantries to help get food to hungry families. Even with Christian groups and the U.S. government leading the way, the need remains, says Melendez.
But we can't food bank our way out of hunger. We also can't food stamp our way out of hunger. We're not going to end hunger until we address those kind of root causes. Why is it that families are hungry?
It's a question that remains to be answered, and a reminder that childhood hunger can affect anyone and will take everyone's help to solve. David Brody, CBN News, in Des Moines, Iowa.
No matter how many times you've seen it, there is nothing quite like the joyous sight of a military family being reunited.
Especially when it's a surprise. Senior Chief Petty Officer Norman Segai decided to surprise his wife and sons after being away from home for 10 long months serving his country. Joyce Segai thought she was just going to this restaurant in La Mesa, California for a brunch to honor military moms. You can see she's beginning to cry, missing her husband. And as her son comforts her, in walks Norman.
The one for surprises, so we'll see how that goes.
Did you have the slightest idea?
Not the slightest idea. My heart's pounding. I don't even know. I have no words.
Wonderful. Just look at that wonderful, happy reunion. Norman's wife's best friend helped him arrange the event after he found out that he'd be coming home early.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, finally this hour, a tweetable message to pass along to you this Tuesday and hopefully inspire you as well. Remember, God has called you to a purpose greater and higher than yourself. And if you're breathing, it is not too late or too early to walk in it. Don't let people convince you that you are ever too old or too young to do big things for God. He is ready to work through you. And if he's called you to it, guess what? He will also qualify you for it.
Amen. Praise God. I like that. Well, that's going to do it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And be sure to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.